All right, let's just get right into it. Welcome to today's explainer. Now, usually, we unpack complex data or intricate research here. But today we're looking at a different kind of source material, one that really requires a much more somber, empathetic lens. We're analyzing this profoundly moving plea that recently surfaced on the YouTube channel Hussein Mansouri. It's a really short update, and it's accompanied by this deeply poetic piece of music and text, but man, it holds an absolute universe of emotion. We're going to deconstruct the brief, heartbreaking story of little Raj Babu and really look at how we, as human beings, use poetry, metaphor, and community to process just unimaginable pain.
Right off the bat, the source material grounds us in its emotional core. This isn't some distant, abstract case study. The family's direct request to the public is just simply, please pray for him. There's no elaborate fundraising pitch here, no complex medical jargon to start us off. It's just a raw, desperate request thrown out into the digital universe. And it brilliantly illustrates that universal human instinct, right? That need to seek out a community, to literally ask strangers for a moment of their thoughts and their hopes when you're faced with an overwhelming crisis.
But underneath that simple plea is a harsh clinical reality. The source material states it plainly. Little Raj Babu is suffering from stomach cancer. Now, what's really striking about this plea is the intense contrast it creates. On one hand, you have this warm, affectionate nickname, Little Raj Babu, a name that instantly makes you think of soft cheeks and childhood play. And on the other hand, you have stomach cancer, this sterile, terrifying, incredibly aggressive medical diagnosis. Putting these two phrases side by side in the source text, it just forces us to confront the brutal unfairness of the whole situation.
And then, the source delivers this staggering piece of context. Little Raj Babu is just 1.5 years old. 18 months. So the absolute crucial point here is this. We are talking about a child who has barely learned to walk, a child who is just beginning to form words, whose entire world should literally only consist of toys, safety, and learning to explore. By highlighting his extreme youth, the original poster maximizes the emotional hook. It makes his vulnerability impossible to ignore. It's a number that instantly shatters any emotional distance you might try to keep.
And that brings us to our first section, the little bird, unpacking the metaphor of innocence. Let's see how this family's plea transitions from hard medical facts into a beautiful, heartbreaking verse. The text accompanying the story opens with this incredibly tender line of poetry. Translated into English, it reads as a plea to a tiny bird. My little bird, tiny little bird, come flutter in the courtyard once again. I really want you to picture that natural imagery for a second. It's not focusing on hospital beds or IV drips. It focuses completely on the delicate, quick, fragile movements of a small bird. It shifts our perspective entirely, taking us away from the clinical environment and bringing us back to the natural, gentle rhythm of normal life. And this just brilliantly illustrates how cultural expressions of love work. The phrase used in the source text translates to my little bird, and it's a really powerful term of endearment. Actually, it brilliantly and tragically captures the delicate nature of a 1.5-year-old child. Because think about it, a little bird is fragile, right? It needs protection. It brings music and joy to a space. Its presence is light and vibrant. By comparing Raj Babu to this tiny creature, the verse perfectly encapsulates the family's protective instincts and just the immense fragility of his current state. Furthermore, the poem specifically asks this little bird to return to the courtyard. Now, in many cultures, and definitely in the context of this source, the courtyard represents the very heart of the home. It's a place of ultimate safety. It's where families gather, where children play safely in the sunlight. So the plea for the child to come flutter in the courtyard once again is this desperate, agonizing longing for a return to normalcy. It's their wish for the illness to just disappear so his playful presence can fill the home once more.
But the poetry doesn't shy away from the terror of the situation, which leads us to our next section, a blood-stained darkness, the poetic expression of disease. Let's explore how the text confronts the illness. The next line of the verse strikes with a really heavy, visceral blow. Translated, it reads, "The darkness is dense and stained with blood." Let's just pause and let the sheer emotional weight of that line sink in for a moment. This isn't a doctor's chart. This is the raw fear of a family. They are looking at the disease not just as mutating cells, but as this encroaching, suffocating darkness that is fundamentally unnatural and violent.
When we take the literal medical threat of stomach cancer and juxtapose it against the poetic expression of a dense, blood-stained darkness, we see exactly how art processes literal tragedy. The medical term tells us what is physically happening to the body, sure, but the poetic expression tells us how it feels to the soul. The family feels trapped in a dense darkness, basically a nightmare from which they are desperately trying to wake their child.
Which brings us to the turning point of the poem. Section 3. Gathering Rays of Hope, Fighting the Darkness.
Because where there's deep despair, the human spirit often produces a beautiful, fragile fight for survival. The verse continues with this absolutely stunning piece of imagery. It asks the little bird to pick twigs of rays from the sky and bring them back to the courtyard. Think about that imagery for a second. It's asking this fragile little bird to fly up into the sky, gather up pieces of sunlight, and bring them home. It's a profound counterattack to that dense darkness we just talked about.
The absolute crucial point here is this metaphor of gathering twigs of rays. I mean, how do birds build their nests? Twig by tiny twig, right? It's slow, it's painstaking work. Here, the metaphor suggests that combating this severe illness requires gathering tiny, almost impossible fragments of hope and light. Every single prayer, every good wish, every small medical victory is a twig of light. The family is trying to gather every single tiny beam of hope they can find to build a nest of safety for Raj Babu, literally fighting off the dark.
And that metaphor brings us full circle to our final section, a plea for prayers, uniting in hope.
Because look, the poetry is gorgeous, but it serves a very real, urgent purpose. It's a conduit, connecting their private pain with the public's capacity for empathy. If we look at the whole structure of this narrative, it follows 3 distinct steps. Step 1, acknowledging the harsh reality of stomach cancer at 1.5 years old. Step 2, seeing the fragile innocence of the child, the little bird who belongs in a sunny courtyard. And Step 3, gathering rays of hope together. You see, the family can't gather enough light on their own to pierce a darkness this dense. That is exactly why they put this out onto the internet. They're asking the community to help them gather those twigs of light.
Which leaves us with this final thought. When we consume information online, especially stories of hardship, it's so easy to just keep scrolling, isn't it? But the source material today asks us to pause. It asks us to honor little Raj Babu's fight. So I leave you with this. How do we, as a community of viewers and human beings, gather rays of light for a family facing such unimaginable darkness? Whether it's through the prayers they explicitly asked for, through supporting pediatric cancer research, or simply by holding on to our own empathy, the plea has been made. The rest is up to us. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and take care.